Tomorrow, I'm old. Thinking of all the things I could have changed. I think too much, wait too much. I try to do things but never do things. I want to say something but say nothing. I'd like to do so many things.
Fight for something. Step up for something.
Walk the talk.
But instead, I'll do it later, or maybe tomorrow.
Or maybe never.
So lazy, like a boxer who's been beaten
Aimlessly, shamelessly.
staring at my cell phone. Once I almost fought corruption.
And once I almost such and such and such and such and
blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. I want to make sense. Ignite, flame, burn.
I know it sounds
crazy and dumb and
hazy.
But my time will pass.
And until then, I'm alive and I'm free and I'm strong.
So tomorrow, when I'm old, I want to think about all the things I have changed. What about you?
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm back. And you have no idea how much I missed your cute little faces. So it is so great to be back home. Listen, let me fill you in on a couple things. First of all, I got to just say a whopping thank you to the amazing weekend teaching team we had in July, August. I was elevated. Were you elevated with our teaching team? So to Steve, to Jason, to Jay, to Linda, to Apollo, to Connor, I am so lucky to be able to work with these men and women. And I was elevated all summer long as we looked at the great life-changing verses of the Bible. So on a personal note, if I may, my summer had 4 components. First of all, great times with the family. We are a very close family, and we really have meaningful, fulfilling times. And by God's grace, we get along remarkably well. I mean, I don't know how that works, because we're all talking and dreaming and yelling, and my house is just like a house on steroids all the time with kids. And okay, so anyhow, that's the first thing, great times as fam. Secondly, my summer was about investment. I went to Germany for a 3-week period, and God opened some doors for me to work with the key spiritual leaders in the whole country, in Munich, in Berlin, and in Hamburg. And if we can influence Germany with the gospel, and that is happening, we can influence the whole EU. And so it was very, very fruitful investment, mentoring, discipling, collaborating, and so forth. Thirdly, I worked. And mostly that is study and prayer in terms of preparing the next 10 months to feed you people a Thanksgiving feast every single weekend. That's our goal as a teaching team, to unpack truth in ways that are transformational. And we believe the next 10 months we have really a dynamic spiritual meal menu, as it were. The fourth thing I did this summer is I biked. And from late June to the present moment, I've biked a little bit over 1,200 miles and just have had, my bike is my happy place. I think, I pray, I sing. I'm a horrible singer, but I'm on my bike, so that's your problem if you don't like it. I'm just singing away at the top of my lungs, do a lot of phone calling, talking to leaders and stuff. And I just have to tell you, this summer was so much better than last summer, because last summer I was bald and fetal from chemotherapy, and this summer, I picked this summer, and don't want to have to do last summer again, although God sustained me, and I still got that huge old Nike shoebox with all of your encouragement, your notes, cards, emails, prayers, and so that will be a treasure to me for the rest of my days. So that's what's been going on. By the way, I had a good report in May from that May cancer test, another one coming up in 3 weeks, and I am feeling buoyant and optimistic. My life, like you, my life is in His hands, and I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. Okay, let's dive in. Imagine with me, America has about 500,000 congregations, church families, right? I want you to imagine that we take those 500,000 church families and divide them into segments of 20 churches. You got it? 20 churches, 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 okay? What's happening in every 20 churches right now, today, in American culture? Let me tell you. 18 out of 20 churches is plateaued, declining, or dying. This grieves me. How can any church that follows a living God be dead? Do you see the disconnect? Houston, we got us a problem. Something is not right if 18 out of 20 churches are sucking fumes. That should not be. Plateaued, declining, or dying. 1 out of the 20 churches is growing by transfer growth. You say, John, what's transfer growth? That's disgruntled sheep. The Bible calls us sheep, you know? That's disgruntled sheep moving from one sheep pen to another sheep pen. And usually they bring a backpack full of baggage along with them, right? Okay, you'd have to argue that's not really the biblical mission of legitimate growth, because those people in some version probably already have a relationship with Christ. You say, John, is there any good news in here? We're already at 19. There's only 20 churches that we're talking about. Yeah, that there's 1 in 20 churches that is growing by convert growth, which is to say the lost are genuinely being found. In other words, they're beginning their relationship with Christ and not stopping there, but begin to move forward towards spiritually maturing. God is calling you and I to be part of a 1 in 20 church. Now, if we want to be a 1 in 20 church, let me tell you what it's going to take, okay? Because what you want is more happy news, and this is going to be gravy, piece of cake, no problemo. No, it's not going to be a problem, but we're going to have to think about how we go forward, and it's this. We have to embrace visionary change. Because the day in your personal life, or we as a church, the day that we are done changing, we are simply done. Does that make sense? I'm not talking about changing our core beliefs, our doctrine, philosophy, biblical mission, none of those things. I'm talking about all the rest of the stuff. Every local church is only 1 or 2 bad decisions away, or non-decisions, because not making a decision when a decision has to be made is also a bad decision. Most churches are only a bad decision or 2 away from irrelevance. From irrelevance. That scares me. So we've got to learn to embrace visionary change, and that's what we're going to talk about this weekend. We're calling it Update 1.0. Next weekend, Update 2.0. Third weekend and final weekend, last weekend of September, Update 3.0, as we talk about embracing visionary change. God is calling us to be one of those 1 in 20 churches, okay? Take your notes in hand if you would. Let's dive in and talk about the first of the 4 items. Do you see the overview for where we're going in our Bible study today? Let's talk about embracing visionary change. And what I want us to do is let's pull apart those 3 words. Let's start with embracing. Okay, forget this. If I haven't seen you for a while and I've missed you, which I have, and I do this, what am I giving you? I'm giving you a hug or an embrace. We have a choice to make. Are we going to hug necessary change, or are we going to run from it? Or are we going to resent it? Or are we going to straight arm it? Or are we going to reject it? I say again, the day that we're done changing in our individual lives or in the local church, we are done. And God says, see, in the book of Isaiah, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? Streams of water in the wilderness and so forth. Jesus talked about it another way. He said, we have to become like new wineskins, which is to say pliant and adaptable and flexible. But do you know what the normal pull on we human beings is when it comes to spiritual matters? Is we get very stiff and very stuck. We get very brittle. You know why? Because we like what we like, bless God. See, we like what we like. And God likes it too. That's why I like it. God told me and God were tight. See, I've never had anybody disagree with anything, doesn't have God on their side. They've always got God on their side. How do you argue against God? Okay? We have to learn to hug the changes that God is bringing at strategic moments in our lives individually or in our church corporately. Let's talk about visionary, the second word there in embracing visionary change. What is vision? Let me use maybe a more common word, faith. Did you know that Jesus taught us that faith is the oxygen of the kingdom of God? In other words, there are two kingdoms, the kingdom of this world and the kingdom of God, but they don't operate on the same fuel. You know how our world operates. You know how we know that? Because we live in it every day. It operates on all the stuff that our five senses can experience and connect with, right? But the kingdom of God operates on something that we cannot see, and it's called faith and trusting God and applying the transformational truth of Scripture. Remember, truth doesn't change us until we do it. If we hear truth and don't do truth, we remain unchanged. And so faith or vision is the oxygen of the kingdom of heaven. Remember, we're not just saved by faith. Jesus said the just shall live by faith. Churches that are 1 in 20 churches are churches that have understood how, in a very practical way, we're not going freaky religious here. We're not talking being weird. These churches have learned how to master the fundamentals of full devotion to Christ, and at the same time, at key moments in their history, they're taking key strategic steps of faith. And here's what that includes. It includes some risk, because change at its core, watch this, is moving from the known to the unknown, from the comfortable to the uncomfortable. How many of you love to be uncomfortable? You know what's the funniest thing in the world? You know almost nobody travels anywhere in an airplane anymore without their own pillow. Why do you like your pillow? Because you'll have a neck ache the next morning. Because the pillow at the hotel or the pillow at grandma's house or whatever the deal is, it's too hard, too soft, too small, too big, too lumpy, too whatever, right? So we travel with our pillow. I'm just gonna confess, confession time. I travel with my stupid little travel pillow. Otherwise, I'm walking around in Germany for 3 weeks like this with a stiff neck. Okay, we're gonna be uncomfortable and we're gonna be delving into the region of the unknown if we're gonna be a people of faith, and that will scare us. But God is calling us, we believe as your servant leaders, God is calling us to some big, hairy, scary, audacious dreams. Did you get that? They are hairy, they are scary, they are big, and they are audacious, and they are from God. We believe this. And the just shall live by faith. Because what God's wanting you and I to do is for us to begin to live the life we've always dreamed of. Aren't you tired of living about a third of your potential, half of your potential, just kind of existing just in this same predictable rut? I mean, some of you might feel like your life is like Groundhog Day. I'm saying, baby, it is time to shake it up, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and again, expecting different outcomes. It doesn't work that way. It's time to mix it up, change it up. So first of all, we embrace what God's doing. Secondly, we learn to live by faith, vision, which is the oxygen of the kingdom. By the way, unless you and I are attempting something at which we might fail, we are not living by faith. Is there anything going on in your life these days at which you might fail if God doesn't come through? If there is not, you're playing your life way too safe. Way too safe. Now, what about this issue of change? Well, change is going to require courage. It's going to require a whole new level of understanding, of trusting God, and actually, really even trusting each other. We're going to take some risks, and change, I'm not going to lie to you, change is almost always inconvenient, uncomfortable, often stressful, almost always expensive, and generally a hassle. At least on the front end, it's that way. but it's necessary. Why? The just shall live by faith. God is calling us to embrace visionary change. And I realized that there is a change range in the room. Some of you change easy. Some of you are very stubborn. You kind of dig your feet in, and there's two big skid marks, two big drag marks between your life because God's, come on, kid. He's pulling you along. You dumb kid, I love you, but you ain't the sharpest knife in the drawer. And he's just pulling you along because change does not come easy to you. Now, listen to these well-known people.
John, hey, sorry to interrupt, but you know, when speaking of change,
this might not be good. Good morning, Steve.
Well, speaking
Hi, buddy.
hey, bud, good to see you. Hey, speaking of change, I was just thinking about, you know, the whole idea of these phones. I have an Android operating system, and to be honest with you, I was a charter member of the Update Haters Anonymous. And literally on a regular basis, in fact, right now on my phone, there are at least 5 updates waiting for me. But I don't know, maybe I'm one of those guys. Those are my skid marks that you saw right there. Because they always tell me new and improved, but for me, new and improved means different and confusing and frustrating. I find them very frustrating. And to be honest with you, I really don't like change that much, especially when it comes to my phone. But, you know, for example, texting. Especially getting rid of ones I don't want, used to be so easy. Just push this and here they're gone. But then guess what? They updated it, and to me it seemed more confusing and frustrating. But you know, John, what I discovered is the reality of updates, and that is that they're just going to keep coming. And so I can either embrace them or I can continue to be frustrated. And so, you know what I'm doing? I'm embracing the change because most of the time I find that it's actually better. Oh, and by the way, I'm no longer a part of the Update Haters Anonymous.
Give it up for Steve. Here's another thought, get an apple. Okay, moving forward, I want you to listen to these comments by well-known people around the world. Benjamin Franklin said this about embracing visionary change. He said, when you're finished changing, you are finished. William Arthur Ward said, the pessimist complains about the wind. Now, this is a very germane illustration for us up here on this beautiful hill. Pessimists complain about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The realist adjusts the sails. Some of you simply have to adjust your sails, or in reference to wind, get yourself a hat. Okay, here's another one. This is by Karen Lamb. A year from now, you will wish that you had started today. You say, started what? Anything. You know the changes you all are longing to make in your life. I mean, you've been hoping to do, wanting to do this change, planning to do it, and you still haven't pulled the trigger. A year from now, you'll wish you had started today. And all of a sudden, the days, the weeks, the months, the years, and the decades pass us by. Once upon a time, we were young. Now we are old. We are unchanged, and life has passed us by. Leo Tolstoy, I love this guy, great Russian playwright and author. He says, you know, everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. How about Tony Gwynn, the legendary Major League Baseball player? He said, the minute you're satisfied with where you are, you're no longer there. One of the greatest hitters in the history of Major League Baseball. I love this one, it's transformational. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. Did you get that? So that brings me to ask us all the question, with what lens are we viewing life? Are you viewing your life, your relationships, your family, your career, vocation, job, this church? Are you viewing it through a lens that is a God-based lens, which is to say, it is a rosy-colored hue, your lens, where you're seeing reality around you with a hopefulness, a joy, a gratitude, a flexibility, a pliance, just the willingness to continue to go with the things that God's bringing your way, with faith and vision. Or are you looking through the lens where my life is cursed? Bad stuff always happens to people, but mostly it happens to me. I am embittered. I feel so very alone. I am angry. I resent what my life has become. Some of you may have even accidentally drifted into that being the lens through which you view your life. Listen, this is not a bunch of pop psychology, positive self-help nonsense shenanigan. We are not talking about that. We are talking about spiritual things here. And are we going to look at life with the eye of faith or the eye of cynicism? The eye of God is the keeper of his promises, or are we going to look at it through the lens of it'll never work out? See, you and I have a choice. We can allow ourselves to drift into becoming together as a church permanently just another run-of-the-mill church, playing it safe, playing games with God, one of those 18 churches that is plateaued, declining, or dying. While we're doing that, and while we're obsessing over ourselves, why everything dies around us, 8.5 million beautiful, precious souls in the Bay Area will pass into eternity without Jesus Christ. That's an option. It's a lousy option, but it is an option. Evidently, some churches, by default, seem to be choosing that route. Or we can have a laser focus with joy on our biblical mission of loving God and loving people. See, that's the alternative lens, the alternative option. We also must understand that we are accountable before God for our individual lives and for this church collectively. I went to Germany this fall, or rather this summer, and I went deep into the life of a German monk that without this individual having lived, you and I would not be here today. His name is Martin Luther. Read a couple thousand pages on Luther's life, and went to Wittenberg outside of Berlin and the site of the Reformation and just where it all happened, 95 Theses. And so Luther wrote in one of his journals these words: "The devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape." And it's true, we are easily seduced away from the best version of ourselves, God's will for our life, our highest spiritual agenda. We can easily be pulled away from that. We can drift and be seduced. Let's move to item number 2 and talk about our first 6 years together. You may or may not know that my wife and I were so privileged to have the entrustment of God to come and be your pastor beginning in 2011. But there was something going on in this wonderful church family in 2009, 2010, and up through 2011, and that's that the church is going through some difficult days. But that's okay. You say, why is it okay going through difficult days? Well, first of all, it's okay because what doesn't kill us will make us stronger. That's the first reason. Second reason it's okay is this church weathered it beautifully. You say, John, how can that be? Because the collective heart of this church is good and beautiful. And a church body is like our physical body. When our physical body is healthy and well, and our immune system is fully functioning, right now, as you sit and we talk together, we're fighting off viral infection, bacterial infection, all kinds of communicable disease, whatever it may be. That's what church bodies can do too. When they are well, they can weather the storm. And again, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. This is a beautiful church. We began our journey in 2011 together, and these are some of the things that happened. We had our honeymoon together. You know what a honeymoon is, of course, when two people that thought they knew each other really get to know each other. I can tell you with all honesty, and I don't believe in flattery because flattery is about manipulation, and the Bible counsels against it. I can say with all honesty, I love you, this church, as individuals and collectively more every single day of my life. And that's the truth. Furthermore, What else did we do? We empowered and tweaked existing ministries, and we brought honored closure to some ministries that had run their course. We next continued to build a dynamic team of servant leaders, women and men, as pastors and deacons and ministry directors, and these are exceptional people to spend your life with. They are good to the core. By the way, if I can tell you a secret, I can't tell you their name, but I'll just give you their initials. The initials are Apollo Solse. Apollo Solse and his wife, our high school pastor, they have the great news. They are expecting twin boys who will arrive in December. Just wanted you to know. I got permission to share that, by the way. So we're going to have us a fun Christmas. I'm kind of the opa, the grandfather to all these kids and stuff, and it's a fun old shenanigan. What else did we do? Well, we transformed this entire existing campus. You may or may not know that. Took us a few years to get it done, mostly because it takes forever to build anything in California. You have to wait. You just got to get in line and wait your turn, and took many, many months and so forth. Hundreds of people used their skilled crafts to make it happen. We invested a little over $2 million, but what we have here is a 50,000 square foot ministry environment that is now state-of-the-art for the 21st century on 38 acres of land in the most dynamic region, the Bay Area of the United States of America. Furthermore, we believe collectively over the last 6.5 years, hundreds and probably thousands through all the ministry expressions in this church, thousands of people have come to Christ through the ministries of this church in Contra Costa County and beyond. It's true. Furthermore, by God's grace, you helped my wife and I weather obviously a difficult physical health challenge period, and probably it slowed down the vision piece for a year while I was recovering, but here we are today, and we are raring to go. Look at item 3. We're actually going to skip item 3, the good things God's up to in our church these days, because if we start, we're going to be here till Thursday, and you will be distinctly unhappy with me, so we're not even going to get started. I will simply say, I hope your eyes and I hope your heart is wide open to what God is doing, because God is doing extraordinary stuff in the lives of the thousands of people of this church family. I mean, extraordinary stuff. And if you didn't know, this church is about 90 years old now, and it began right in the center of the Great Depression in the late 1920s. I'll be talking more to you about that in the next couple weekends. For 9 decades, the men and women of Concord, of Contra Costa County, of the East Bay, of the Bay Area have been working and sweating and praying and ministering and investing and tithing and missionarying and all that stuff, and that's why this church is yet vibrant today. Okay, let's go to item number 4, our biblical mission. I want you to hit the refresh button. You'll be familiar with most of this, but what I want us to do is do a quick refresher on what our biblical mission is from God. This is our simple, laser-focused agenda. Fill it in with me, number 1. Would you please, that first arrow? Loving God and loving people. That's who we are, and that's what God's calling us to be. Say it with me in a big, loud voice, everybody. Would you please? Go. Loving God and loving people. Now, this biblical mission is from the lips of the Master himself. Listen to what Jesus said in Matthew 22. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. So there's the love God piece of our biblical mission. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. There's the second part, the loving people part. Fill this in if you would, please. This is the great commandment, and this is our great biblical mission. Loving God, loving people. Say it with me one more time. Loving God and loving people. What does loving people look like? What does it actually mean? Let's unpack that for a moment as we wrap this morning. Fill it in. It looks like winning the lost and maturing the found. Ultimately, That's what loving people looks like. Winning the lost, taking the love of God to wonderful people created in God's image whose lives are broken and they are weighed down with sin. It's winning the lost and it's maturing the found. Say that phrase with me, would you please go? Winning the lost and maturing the found. Don't take my word for it. Take his word for it. Listen to Luke 19:10, Jesus speaking. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. His words, not our words. And he calls us to follow in his steps and do exactly the same thing. Seek and save the lost in his name. But then notice the companion passage in Matthew 28. Jesus came to them and said, therefore go and make disciples of all nations. He did not say go and make converts of all nations. It doesn't end there. It only begins there. You say, John, what is a disciple? Well, the word disciple, the etymology, it comes from the word disciplined. A disciple is a disciplined follower of Jesus in this context. You say, well, how do you become a disciplined follower, John? Well, look at the rest of the passage there in Matthew 28. It's right there before you. Notice, teaching them to obey. Circle the word obey, everything I've commanded you. That's who is the real deal. That's how to easily identify a real follower. These are women and men that in ways little and big on a daily basis have begun to obey Jesus as they begin to follow Jesus. Fill it in, would you please? This is the Great Commission. So we have a great commandment of loving God, loving people. We have a great commission of winning the lost and maturing the found. Now, can I diffuse a notion which is sort of, I think, assumed maybe in American churches? I want to tell you what my job is not. My job is not to make you happy. My job is to make you holy. I can't make you happy. I tried for the first 15 years of my ministry. I was in my 20s, dumb as mud, and I spent the first 15 years of my life looking around, seeing all these unhappy people thinking, I love them, I can make them happy. That's a recipe for a nervous breakdown. Okay, you know what I'm saying? People are as happy as they decide to be. You know whose job it is to make you happy? It's your job. So if you're happy, it's on you. If you're unhappy, it's on you. I'm giving you the spiritual recipe for how to truly be happy. Are you ready? Become a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ. Lay down your life fully. Take up your cross and follow him. When you surrender your life fully to Jesus, I promise you, you will be happy. And I promise you, I'll continue to do my hardest work for you because I love you to make you holy. And we're going to get this thing done. Okay, just wanted to say that. That's for free. I just put that out there for your consideration. Now, you see what we've just talked about in our biblical mission? Loving God, loving people, winning the lost, maturing the found. Look at me, would you please? If we do anything short of this, we have failed. If we do anything short of what we've just described as our biblical mission from the words of Jesus himself, we have failed. It is not an option to play it safe. It is not an option to go in days ahead and pat ourselves on the back. We have got a world to change with the loving gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm asking you this weekend, are you in? Will you own this together with me? Will you say, I'm in? I believe it. Stand to your feet, would you please, for closing prayer?